Welcome to the latest episode of Gryphon Manor. It will feel good to be back out there scratching a living out of the blocky landscape. And as I'm starting over with a fresh world and I'm playing in survival mode, the first item on the agenda is to, survive. Typically, that means crafting some basic tools, setting up a small and thoroughly uncomfortable little shelter, and eating anything edible and within relatively easy reach. After I get these very basic items completed, I can settle down and focus on the real deal. Now, the goals for this episode are set up some basic shelter and agriculture, right? Recon the local area and note places of particularly useful or hard to get resources. Survey the borders of the estate and then clear and fill in the estate. Then set up temporary fields, groves, and livestock pens. And finally set up a windmill for power. And perhaps, last but certainly not least, don't get killed. The first few days in survival Minecraft are pretty much the same for everyone, but things can go in any direction after that. Now, I like to center my base on the center of the game world, and that's partly because I have an OCD screw loose someplace, and partly because it'll make a lot of measurements incredibly easy someday. In this particular case, there's a little bit of water, and it's easily mitigated with a few blocks of dirt. Now, normally I would... what the blazes? An iron golem. Hey, where'd you come from, little feller? There's no village here, but what the map shows is some kind of structure. But where is it? That's something that was introduced into the world as part of the Langley transport mod. Once I build an airship, I'll take a look-see up there, but in the meanwhile, I probably need to think about adding a helmet as a priority item to the goal list. So, as I was saying, I would normally just do all my initial processing and sleeping underground, or at least until the permanent facilities are up and running. But then again, those are usually underground too. That'll be the case this time around as well for the first in-game week or two. But then I plan to build a little cottage on the surface and actually live like a real human being for a while. Seeing the sun and sky and looking on green fields and all that kind of stuff. However, this will be temporary, as will the groves, fields, and animal pens I put up there with the cottage. But they'll be kind of a long-term temporary until I get the permanent facilities built. The area I'm building in is interesting in that the center of the game world is on the north edge of a very unique water feature. Either this is a lake in which there's an island that almost fills the entire lake, or the game generated a river that flows in a circle, and with no intakes or outflow, it's basically a river to nowhere. It is nice to have some water nearby, but otherwise, this particular body of water is not of much use aside from an easy fishing source. Now, I'll need to fill in at least part of it in order to flesh out the estate space as planned, and after that, I'm kind of torn. My first impulse is to drain it completely, but I'm also seriously considering transforming what will remain into maybe a small lake without islands. I don't know. I have a basic space excavated underground now. I'd show you, but if you've seen one first night Minecraft hole in the ground, you've pretty much seen them all. Now I'm grading the land immediately around the origin point so that I can start setting up fields in which to grow food and other useful bits. Of course, the first field's going to be wheat, as that's the easiest to find and get going. However, I'm running the Farmer's Delight mod as well as a few of those add-ons, so there will be plenty of other edible resources to farm at some later point. I'll have several groves of trees for harvesting as well. In addition to all the vanilla flavors, I have a bunch more thanks to the Biomes of Plenty mod, which I'm also running. As I noted before, a good chunk of the estate is currently underwater, so I'll need to take a cue from our Dutch friends and reclaim the land from the lake or river or whatever we're calling it today. The best tools for doing that in Minecraft are, of course, gravel and sand, and once I get going, I should find plenty of both from the recovered land. I'll probably go through a whole lot of shovels as well. Of course, in the very early game, there's a lot to be gained from visiting the nearby villages and meeting the locals. Now, as a general rule, I try not to rob them blind. I don't take anything unless they have 2 or more of them. And yeah, I'll be back later on and build them a complete and proper town with plenty of everything, but until then I just take what I immediately need. Now, to be brutally honest, I was not always like this, but when I was introducing Minecraft to my daughters, who were 4 at the time, they were watching me do the usual routine, and as I was cleaning out a village, they asked me, "Papa, why are you stealing all their stuff?" Which was soon followed by, "Papa, stealing's wrong." So I don't do that anymore. My girls are now 14, and I still don't do that. Yeah, we're talking about Minecraft villagers who are annoying as hell and not even real people, nor do they even physically exist. But I try to treat them fairly and with respect. Later, I'll take it out on the zombies and the creepers. When it comes to livestock, I usually grab chickens first. They supply a decent supply of food, even more so with Farmer's Delight, which gives me a number of egg-based recipes, and they provide feathers, which are required for arrows, which are the great equalizer in terms of dealing with bad guys in the early game. In other words, hurting others with a radically reduced chance of being hurt. They are also easy to start up with. My preferred method of starting a chicken farm is to cache a stack or 2 of eggs, and then build a pen, throw the eggs inside the pen, and I almost always wind up with at least 2 chicks, and I can grow the flock from there. However, this time around I tried grabbing the chickens directly. Now unfortunately, the only chickens that were nearby were in the Mystic Grove, which is also full of foxes. And once I started leading the chickens out of there, the foxes came whipping up from behind and eating my chickens. And I couldn't shoot the foxes as I needed the chickens to make arrows, so I was left trying to run down the foxes and bashing them with my stone sword. Unfortunately, A, the foxes are annoyingly fast and agile, and B, the Mystic Grove is full of undergrowth. So most of my well-aimed blows were landing on the grass and clover that seems to grow everywhere in the Mystic Grove. So I didn't kill a single fox, but the local flora learned who's boss, I can assure you. Unfortunately, this means that I had to go out of my way. I had to go a long way out of my way to find some chickens that were nowhere near the Mystic Grove, and I had to be careful not to bring them too close to a patch of Mystic Grove on the long trek back home. But now I have, or I will have, a steady supply of meat, eggs, and feathers, so in the end it was worth it. I've cleared or reclaimed quite a bit of the estate already, and I probably have enough material to start working on a little house on the surface. Now, it won't need to be fancy, just a place to sleep, cook a proper meal, and maybe set up an enchanting table. For now, it doesn't really matter what it looks like, but this is not a race or anything like that, so I can have a little fun with this, even if it will just be a temporary building. Now, among my favorite building types in real life are the timber-framed wattle and daub houses that can be found scattered throughout Europe. These are relatively easy to reproduce in Minecraft, or at least they're fairly easy and look reasonably similar to the real thing, so I'll go with that. Now, scale is always a challenge when trying to create anything at least semi-realistic in Minecraft, where we work with blocks that are 1 meter in every dimension. Now, to work in details, we have to, and I'm making air quotes here, increase the resolution. Now, we do that by increasing the size a little bit. Now, in the scale I work with for village buildings and this temporary cottage, each floor has 4 blocks of vertical space, which means that it has 4 freaking meters of space between the floor and the ceiling. Now, realistically, it should be between 2 and 3 meters, absolute tops, but it's almost impossible to make anything reasonably decent looking at that scale because the resolution's too low. On the other end of the spectrum, if we used 100 blocks between floor and ceiling, it definitely would not be to scale, but we would have a whole lot more resolution for adding detail, and quite frankly, it would probably look absolutely fabulous. That's what you see with some of those really fantastic builds on YouTube, and the difference in scale becomes pretty clear once you see a player standing in-game next to their creation. but I build to the same scale as the villagers and myself, or at least fairly close to it. Remember what I said last episode? I am driven to build a living world, and that means I need to build it to fit the people and the creatures that will live and interact in that world, including and most especially myself. But getting back to the wattle and daub architecture, these kinds of buildings date back to the Middle Ages, but a large number survive to the present day, and in fact, many towns and villages have these kinds of buildings at the center of the community, usually in the oldest part of the community. So we'll see a lot of them in this world and in a similar context, but we'll also see buildings from later styles and periods as well. Now there was, or I guess there is, a lot of variation in these buildings, and generally my favorites are those that use brick or stone between the framing posts on the ground floor and then wattle and daub on the upper floors, and so that's what I like to recreate in my Minecraft games. Now in vanilla Minecraft, I'm limited to what I can use on the roof and still make it look good. Now my favorites are dark oak planks, or birch planks if I sorta want to simulate thatch, and nether brick and red nether brick if I want to simulate tiles. However, in modded Minecraft, I make sure that all the Macaws mods are always available in my worlds, and that gives me radically more options, and I plan to use almost all of them at some point in this world. With the cottage done, I've worked at reclaiming more land from the water and leveling the rest. Now I've set up more farming plots and lots of groves and trees, but a key element of our goals has yet to even start, and that is the windmill. Now I will use the same general construction style and materials as a cottage so that they match, and probably because I have a bunch left over. But this is also my first functioning windmill in Minecraft, so it'll be a bit of a learning experience as well. I'll set it up to power a millstone within the mill itself, but I also want to run a shaft down through the floor so that I can set up a contraption or two in the first underground level, and that should give me some flexibility until I can get the workshop properly set up and provisioned. Next to the windmill is the little cottage where I've set up a small dinette and functional kitchen to keep me fed during future episodes. Up the stairs, I've created a small and comfy living area and an interim enchanting area until the permanent space is ready. And with the completion of the windmill, that should essentially complete the last of the goals I'd set for this episode. I do have some basic shelter. It's comfy even. And I have plenty of food, and I'm growing plenty more in addition to wood and livestock. And all of that's in temporary locations on the surface of the estate. Speaking of the estate, I have surveyed, leveled, and otherwise prepared the entire estate. I've even almost completed the permanent fence around the grounds, and I just set up the windmill, so I no longer feel powerless, so to speak. But if there is a failure to achieve one of my stated goals here, it is the fact that I died a few times, and that was more of a guideline or wish than an actual goal, and it was a stretch one at that. Mostly me stretching out on the ground, but it's all good now. Aside from the fence, almost everything else you see here will eventually move underground, where it will be automated or it will be replaced by something different and larger, such as the house. But I'm rather pleased with the number and type of resources I'm generating, even if it is all manual work. Now, at some point in the near future, I will sculpt the land immediately surrounding the estate and plant a new forest. Now, the biome is currently birch-based, but I'm not entirely sure that I want to stick to that. I am pretty fond of oak and dark oak forests, but they tend to produce a lot of hostile mobs, so I'll have to think about that one. But after all, I don't know of any spider spawners around here, and I will need a lot of spider eyes for potions. I will also continue to work with the River to Nowhere. I still have not decided what to do with that, but now I'm kind of leaning toward converting it into a proper lake, but the chances are pretty good that I'll change my mind again by the end of the week. The road out of the estate will eventually lead to a kind of ring road that circles the manor and will ultimately lead off to the rest of the world. And I think that's where I'll probably head with the next episode. I've already done a fair bit of running around, but I would like to check out the 25 square kilometers surrounding the manor, and that is a lot of ground, but it also includes a lot of potential resources as well as villages that can be used to tame the countryside and flesh out Gryphonshire. So I hope this finds you and yours in good health, good spirits, and a touch of good fortune. Take care. Cheers.